and welcome to another episode of A View from the Top. I'm Adrian Cropley. A View from the Top is a regular podcast from the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence, where I interview some of the world's leading communication professionals as we explore their career journey. Today, I'm staying close to home in Melbourne as I spend some quality time with a real powerhouse and long-term change doula, Dr. Jen Frahm. That was my term for this amazing professional who, by her own words, says, I can be hard to categorize. I don't fully fit square holes. So we're going to explore that one. I must say how apt that is, though, for somebody like Jen. For many years, I've known Jen, and it's been a pleasure working with her on some change initiatives. And even for a short time, we shared an office. Dr. Jen Frahm is the co-founder of the Agile Change Leadership Institute and co-founder facilitator of Busting Silos, both of which we'll talk about later. But let me add a few more words to Dr. Jen's long and highly impactful career. Change facilitator and coach, international speaker, author, and long-term academic, teller of truths, problem solver, and the one I like is Change Guru because I say that one. So let me welcome Dr. Jen Frahm and say, it's about time we did this, Jen.
Oh my goodness, Adrian. It is well overdue. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
I am so pleased to have you here. And I must admit, when you think back and you go, oh my God, why haven't I had Jen on this before? Because we have talked so often in different events and our paths have crossed. I mean, we live in the same city, but our paths are crossed in so many different places around the world, at conferences, and it's always a joy to connect with you.
And likewise. I don't know how we're going to manage to fit this into the time frame you've allocated for it, though.
I know. I tell you what, when you try and keep these podcasts short and you've got so much to talk about. So I'm going to launch straight into it because there is so much I want you to share with communication professionals because there's such great learning and richness in your career. And I'm going to start with the now. So before we start looking at the career journey and what was it I wanted to be when I grew up, I'm going to start with what is it that you're doing now? Because you have such a variety to your life, working not just in this area of change, but helping organizations and helping organization culture. So what is it that you're doing now?
Oh, goodness. You are right. There is a significant variety of things that I do. But at the forefront, I'm going to say I'm being really intentionally quiet. I'm having a rest. And it is suiting me exceptionally well.
I want one of those. Can we order one?
Yeah, I know. It's been a really quiet start to the year, intentionally, and it's the best thing I could have done. So if anybody is thinking, do they need permission to just have a bit of a rest at the moment, consider this their opportunity. That said, there's a few things going on in the background. So I'm the co-founder of the Agile Change Leadership Institute, which is an organization which provides training and capability building for people in the space of agile and change. And so it's really about making future-ready leaders and change and project practitioners job ready, so better able to deal with these more agile environments that they're working in. So that's such
a value, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And that's a really joyful part of my life. We do a lot of assessment in that. And when you see the assessments coming in with practitioners talking about how their world of work has actually changed for what they've learned in the programs, it is such an unintentional joy in that it was never something we designed for, but once you see it coming through, it just thrills you no end. And then I'm also the co-facilitator on Busting Silos, which is a program on creating better collaboration inside and outside the organization. So that's another piece of work that I do with Melissa Dark. I also work in organizations both as a consultant for design of change or diagnostics around change, but I keep my tools really sharp by working as a contractor. So it's not unusual for me to do, a 6-month stint daily rate contracting in an organization as a change manager.
Yeah.
And I think the common thing that brings all of that together, and whereas my relationship with IABC is that my beginnings were very much in communication, and my focus, communication is inherently how change occurs.
Yeah.
And so there is no change work, there is no agility without having incredible strengths. Your communication capability is the core of all change and agility. So
and this
that's
is
how
really
it all comes together.
Oh, this is brilliant, because this is really why I wanted to talk to you, because you really do connect and join the dots. And it's, as much as you say you've got this variety in your career, it's all interconnected in some way from what you've done throughout your career and your life. Do you think, getting to this stage, I don't mean this to sound like we're all getting old, but you get to a point in your career where you go, no, I think I finally got there. I've got this great variety of things that I do. Is variety something that drives you now you're in this phase of your career?
I was wondering for a moment there, Adrian, were you moving me from change doula to change crone, which I'm okay with, right? I embrace the silver, so it's fine. But back to your real question there. Look, absolutely. I make a lousy employee because I get very bored quickly, and I get very disruptive when I'm bored. So having a variety of things around me suits me really well energetically. But I think the other thing is I'm a control freak, and the safest way I know to future proof is to have a portfolio of interests, so that if something tanks, you think back to 2020 when all of a sudden all of my keynote speaking for the year and all of my workshops dropped in the month of March and really didn't come back for quite some time. It was really, really helpful to have, the Agile Change Leadership Institute offering micro learning online as an income stream. So yes, it is about energy and interests, but two, that's the control freak looking to mitigate risk around me.
That's a really brilliant way of looking at it, because I think for so many people, and I was in the same basket, because when it got to that March 2020 and it just felt like everything fell off the cliff, having that variety where you went, oh, actually, well, yes, that bit has disappeared, and suddenly I'm not getting on a plane, I'm not going to an international conference, I'm not speaking, and people haven't quite got their head around moving face-to-face training to virtual. But there's these other things, there's the stuff that you do in-house and so on. So for many, you could see that where that crash happened and everybody just went, oh my God, what now? But having that diversity and having that variety was something that really supported you.
Absolutely.
Well, that's brilliant. So you are absolutely committed to all the things that you do in your career now, but this had to have started somewhere. So I'm gonna take you back, not so far, but when you were in school and you were looking at what is it that I'm going to do with my life, did you have any clue where you would end up now when you thought about that? What was it you wanted to be?
I wanted to be either an actress or a director, and preferably stage. Although I was seeing what Nicole Kidman was doing and getting a little bit of FOMO there. So I could consider TV. However, an actress or director or a physiotherapist, because, there's so much connecting thread there. And at the time when I was going through high school, physiotherapists was very sexy, and it had the highest entry rate of any profession, above law, above medical. And so my science sadly didn't get me into that path. And when I auditioned for the drama schools, the feedback was, yeah, you can get through with your auditions, but you're really smart, so you should be a teacher. And so I went into drama teaching, diploma of education on drama, and of course, absolutely loathed it and got profoundly depressed with what am I going to do with my life, and returned to a very small town to work for my family business while I sort of worked out what was what. So no, Adrian, no, this, I think I grew up in a small business family where my father wanted me to be a businesswoman. That was his desire. My mother was a creative. She was a writer. So she was very happy with the creative arts path. And I ended up learning that when you're in business, all the world's a stage. So they do tend to connect. But I always describe my career, Adrian, as snakes and ladders. So there was so much,
the analogy.
So much instability in the early 90s for me, late 80s, early 90s. And so I sold wedding gowns, I did wine tastings, I sold furniture, I worked in an advertising agency, I trained as a copywriter in television, I did voiceovers for radio. It was quite wild. And
you were destined for variety, Jen. I'll try a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Yeah, look, and it was really interesting because when I get to my mid-30s, I'm now an academic at the University of Melbourne, and finding that I really don't enjoy academia. That was me being a full-time employee. And I had this real visceral moment one day when I was just about to tender my resignation to go out and do my own thing, which is when you and I first connected.
That's right.
And I had this visceral image come up for me of a tapestry. And all of a sudden, all of these really random jobs that I had all connected in, this beautiful tapestry that made for having your own business in consulting. I knew how to sell, I knew content, I knew there were all these things that I had in my background now that made me really confident that I could have my own business.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, we get to, the 40s and 50s, and I'm now running an institution. So even my academic background in curriculum design continues to weave through into this tapestry of work-life joy. So
it was going to come back, wasn't it?
It really was. That wasn't
spent so much time in it, but it, was it working for the man? It's working for somebody else that was the biggest issue, because that independence that you've obviously had right throughout your life, and that influence, and I particularly look to your father who worked in business.
Yeah.
Those things come together, and suddenly, and I love the analogy of the tapestry. It comes together, and you go, wow, okay, this is what it's all been about.
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting thing for people who seek certainty, right? Around what does the next 3 years look like, the next 5 years look like, etc. And I'm one of those people. But the sooner that you can get comfortable with uncertainty, the more that you can really start to have some fun.
Yeah.
And because so much is unpredictable in terms of what opportunities come forward, and I think, so for me, stability is around being flexible. And I gather there's a paradox with that.
Yes.
But the more flexible I am, the more I create stability for myself.
So tell me a little bit about those moments within your, obviously your life's been made up of lots of moments that's kind of shaped who you've become today. What were some of the highlights that went, when I did this piece of work, or when I did this job, this is what it taught me, and this is the thing that shaped me fundamentally to who I am today?
Oh, that is such a good question. Yeah, you're right. There have been so many, many moments, and it's actually really difficult to draw out key moments because I think I'm a bit of a sponge, and so I could look at every role and go, oh, but there was this and this. But I think in the early 2000s, I was working. I went in to do a change communication contract at one of the banks, and I was really lucky to be working with a very, very experienced senior change lead who was very exacting. She was very demanding. But with that, it was one hell of a schooling. And she had had a large consulting firm background. So with that, I actually learned a lot in the structuring of conversations and kind of the macro shaping of client engagements, more so than the getting in and doing the do. So I think that was definitely a really important element. I think the first time my partner in the Agile Change Leadership Institute, we went to Silicon Valley to run a series of workshops for one of the big tech software organizations. That was amazing.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome.
You know, you go, okay, how did two women in, you know, in their crone age end up being brought to Silicon Valley to teach the techs about agility? You know, that was truly a sensational moment of building.
Is that one of those pinch me moments?
Oh, I can't tell you how much it was a pinch me moment. So I think there's, you know, those two come to mind immediately. But gosh, I've been fortunate, Adrian. There's so many more.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think if you can look back at everything that you've done and gone, wow, I did that. That was a moment that of joy, and the moment that I think I arrived, and then suddenly there's this other moment where I go, oh no, I've arrived now.
Yeah, well, this is it. Because now that we've said this, I've gone, oh, I haven't even acknowledged the fact that I, you know, wrote and published books.
Yes,
they were pretty big too.
I remember when you first released your first book.
Yes,
yes. And I remember the joy on your face when you released that, and then the chatter on social media as you put that out there. That must have been just the most incredible moment for you to get that out there, because you had so much to offer back for people to learn. And I think that, to me, is a moment of absolutely, wow, I'm now giving back. Yes, it's a commercial enterprise, you're doing a book and whatever else, but you're actually giving back and helping people learn. For somebody that was going to push back on academia a little bit.
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. And, you know, I think about Change Leader, the book I released last year. I'm so proud of that. That was such a moment, because that effectively is a love letter to leaders around what they have to change in themselves to be able to lead other people through continuing uncertainty. And there was never a time when that was not more needed. And I've just mixed up so many negatives in that sentence that it becomes people all around the world cringing. But yes, it's, absolutely the opportunity to help others. And I think this is one of the really awesome things when people do, whether they be webinars or books, that you can scale helping. You know, not everybody gets the chance to work with me one-on-one, but you get a book or a webinar, you've scaled that ability to help other people. So that's really, you know, quite humbling.
And I do remember both of us have actually published a chapter in the same book, the Handbook for Organization Communication. You did the one on change of I think it was the last edition. I've just finally done one, because I'm going, writing is so not me as a communication professional, but I've just done one with the latest edition of that book on leadership.
Fabulous.
But there is that joy in being able to go, you know, we are helping that next generation of professionals in their journey. And I think this is, I mean, it's just so much gold that you give back so much to the profession that you've been part of. And in fact, you've been part of multiple professions, if you think about it, right? I'm not going to pigeonhole just in the communication profession. If we look at some of those lessons. Now we talk about kind of making it, and the pinch me moments. It takes a lot of hard work in organizations to get there. To be able to coach and influence leaders is a bit of a journey itself. What are some of the lessons you might share with communication professionals on how they might demonstrate their value for the work they do, and how do they influence the executive?
I think they have to be brave and they have to take risks. And it feels like, for me, there's a precondition to that. You can only be brave and take risks if you've actually done the work first, and you have the knowledge, or you have the runs on the board. I think we're in this era of, faux thought leadership and, personal branding. And I think that can be really problematic for a lot of people, because they take the gloss of the personal branding without the substance behind it. And, the same in the thought leadership space. They regurgitate common wisdom with really good looking tiles, visuals for the socials, but they actually don't have the work behind them. So, and this translates in, stick with me, Adrian. This translates in an organization to, wanting to be an influencer of the senior leadership team, but actually not having the substance behind you. Now, what I'm really conscious of in saying this out loud is that there's going to be members of your audience going, oh, I knew it. I knew I'm an imposter. The irony is, if that thought crosses your mind, you're probably not. Because the people who are the imposters never, ever consider for a moment that they are. So, so I think that, there's a precondition to being brave, is to make sure that you have done the work, that you have the proof points, that when you go up against a leader and challenge their orthodoxy or their thinking, that you've got something that you can point to as to why you've earned the right to do that. The second part of that is to have exceptional interpersonal skills, and you cannot have that level of interpersonal skill or emotional intelligence unless you've done the work on yourself as well. So, I see a lot of people who say they want to influence, but are really lacking in awareness of their own areas of development. And, that the leader will read that, the leader will see that. And, the more, and you will know this, Adrian, the more that you have a conversation with a leader about what you have learned about yourself, the fact that I say I'm a control freak actually reassures a leader, because I understand what they're grappling with.
Yes. And they know that you're going to have the tenacity to stick with it, because you're going to control this.
Yeah. So emotional intelligence to do the influencing, but the grit to have done the work, and courage and bravery. There you go. That's a three-legged stool, Adrian.
And if that's the three biggest things that people take away from this, is absolute gold.
There you
go.
We can do a fancy social media tile on this.
If we can get that one out after. We'll go, right, let's do a tile on this one. What are you going to get out of this episode of A View from the Top? It kind of leads me into, and it's because we're getting to some real juicy stuff about what people need to develop into the future. Because if we think about, emotional intelligence, emotional capital, and I'm doing quite a bit of work around this at the moment, I think it's a space that we're moving very much into more than we've ever done before. I mean, the world is a very, very interesting place right now. And I know people are having lots of conversations around where are we going in this world today, and what's kind of happening, and what change is on the horizon. And change is absolutely always on the horizon. But I think there's a certain set of skills and abilities that the leaders of the future, the communication leaders of the future need to have. Could you share with me your thoughts on what some of that future need and competencies that we're going to need to develop?
Yeah, sure. I think if we establish, to your point, our organizational audiences are polarized and paralyzed at the moment. They are overwhelmed and they are exhausted.
Yep.
That creates a context for communicators to work in like nothing else before. And my sense is that there are threads that we need to start exploring in the space of trauma-informed, so trauma-informed organizations. My read is that we are working with people who are cumulatively and collectively traumatized by the last couple of years. And whereas we might have known what to do once in a while when we had a team member who came forward with some form of personal trauma that they'd experienced, it's a whole different ballgame when you're looking at thousands of people in your workforce. And so I'm not saying that communications people have to be psychologists or even, counselors, but I do think they need to be reading up on the trauma-informed literature at the moment to understand how that might shift and shape policies in organizations and practices. We've known for some time that neuroscience is a ridiculously important field to us. We need to now be attentive to the new research coming out as to what our brains are doing under extreme fatigue and overwhelm. Because again, what we will have learnt from a neuroscience perspective around communication will have changed. It's too early to see the studies, but you will see in the next couple of years new studies coming out to say what has happened to our neural pathways as a result of the last couple of years and what does that mean for a communicator. So I think trauma and neuroscience are the areas that we need to be skilling up in. I'm really curious about futures thinking and some of the tools that we use in futures thinking. And I'm really curious around how we might adapt that in our communications practice, because people who do futures thinking have tended to be a very rarefied breed of people, and somewhat exclusive in their domain. And I've got a hunch that's going to be a little bit more mainstream over the next couple of years. And it might be a really exciting path for communications professionals to take the lead in.
I look, that just absolutely resonates with a lot of my thinking around this too, in terms of future and future skills. And it says to me that the fundamental role of communication professionals is changing quite rapidly now in this new world, and you kind of feel it, that the change is there, but you're going, so what does that look like? Because I think people are still trying to hold on to actually we add value by editing good content, correcting people's spelling, and writing a good piece, which is all important stuff. But I think what you're describing is so much more to the role of a communication professional, and also the role, because we've often, and I don't know whether I want to open this bag of worms, but we've often looked at change communication or change being very separate to communication. And to me, there seems to be coming together more than it's ever done before. Is you can't understand one without the other.
Yeah, I think it's really problematic. Look, I'm not in general. I have reservations about the slashy, right? The change/project manager, the change/comms manager, the comms/training manager. That said, there is something exceptionally powerful about a change practitioner who is deeply embedded in communication practice, and a comms practitioner who understands change and the implications of change is such a valuable commodity in our organization. So I think I'm with you on that. I can probably get a bit more comfortable with a slashy in that space. I think it offers incredible value. And I think, to your point about the editing and the value we offer, we've also got this new area now around curator of information and sense maker of misinformation.
Yes.
That's going to be a real value add for the comms profession, being able to identify and help employees understand which information sources they pay attention to. I think there's a real strong pathway there in terms of adding value beyond editing sentences and, making sure the message is clear, because it's
editing truth, like it's looking for the truth in it, not just looking for what, is it a nice written piece, is it actually fundamentally true, is it misleading?
Yes.
So I think that ethics piece comes into play a huge amount, doesn't it? And I think the more we tap into the neurosciences, where we're arming people with the skills of influence, that we're influencing for good. We could go into a very scary area here, Jen.
We could.
It's not, because we are actually running out of time, and I hate it when I get to this stage and I go, I just want to talk so much more. But I'm going to leave it on to you sharing some of your top tips you would give communication professionals, particularly those working in change. And I know you would have covered some of those in terms of what they should be studying, what they should be thinking about. But what would be the biggest tips to building a career in change?
Yeah, okay. So I think there is a knowledge base there that is easily accessible to communications people in the space of change. And, Google is your friend there. This doesn't have to be a high cost exercise to skill up in the space of change. Obviously, there are a number of providers out there where you can do courses in that. So having the knowledge of change and how people respond in change is really important. But at a practical level, Adrian, I think, communication skills are it's about moving your work to the micro. Micro communications is so important in organizations at the moment, especially going through change. Moving your skill set to really strong engagement. How do you engage with different groups, and different engagement techniques and facilitation techniques is really important. And then the third is your visual communications. You've got to get, really sharp with being able to use the software and platforms that help you present communication visually, and particularly information. I think they're the three areas from a skill set that's really important if you're going to be working in the space of change.
Some really practical tips, and thank you so much, Jen, for that. As I said, we could talk for hours. We're at the end of our episode, and can I just say thank you so much, and forgive me for taking so long before having you on an episode of A View from the Top. I think familiarity breeds contempt, I'm sure. We've known each other for so long. Jen, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much.
A joy to spend this time with you, Adrian. Thank you so much.
And thank you everyone for joining us in this episode of A View from the Top. I look forward for you joining in our next episode coming up very shortly.